This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
On this week's programme, we attend the 21st Cyprus Summit organised by The Economist, and we talk to two former Egyptian foreign ministers, Sameh Shoukry.
It does open the door, hopefully, that it should go beyond a ceasefire, beyond the potential administration of Gaza, and address the core issue of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which is the implementation of a two-state solution, the resolution of the conflict permanently by the creation of a Palestinian state, which corresponds to international legitimacy, international consensus, and is part of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people to live in a state of their own.
And Amre Moussa.
I exclude, of course, the current government in Israel because they never spoke about peace or showed respect for the prospects of peace. But there are Israelis, I suppose, that would understand that for peace to be established, they have to consider what the Palestinians need. And the important thing that the Palestinians insist on and need to have is a Palestinian state.
And we hear an intervention from a Cypriot politician, as well as some answers to a pertinent question about who will pay for Gaza's reconstruction. On Monday, I attended the 21st Annual Cyprus Summit organised by The Economist, and one of the sessions was entitled The Path from Crisis to Peace in the Middle East. One of the keynote speakers on the panel was Sameh Shoukry, former Egyptian Minister of Foreign Affairs. I caught up with him afterwards and asked him to outline the main points that he'd made in his intervention.
Well, primarily, I think much centered around the Trump 20-point plan and to what extent it creates a horizon for peace. And definitely, I think many in the international community, certainly in Egypt, we consider it a very positive development in that it had brought to an end the military actions in Gaza, the bloodshed that has occurred, the number of casualties, Palestinian casualties that have perished, and of course the current humanitarian situation in Gaza with the vast destruction of dwellings, the lack of healthcare, education, shelter, and the lack of food and the utilization of food as a weapon of war. The restrictions still posed, despite the plan, on the entrance of humanitarian assistance, foodstuffs, medical supplies to Gaza, and the restrictions that the Israeli government remains putting in place. But then it does open the door, hopefully, that it should go beyond a ceasefire, beyond the potential administration of Gaza, and address the core issue of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which is the implementation of a two-state solution, the resolution of the conflict permanently by the creation of a Palestinian state, which corresponds to international legitimacy, international consensus, and is part of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people to live in a state of their own. And that is the positive and optimistic perspective that I hope will materialize, and we all hope it will materialize.
There are many hurdles.
There are many hurdles because of the complexity of the 20-point plan and the various components and dynamics, which again might put in question whether there is a sufficient political will. And here again I would address it more towards Israel being the state with institutions, with a military, with capabilities. And does it want to end this conflict? Will it be willing to relinquish control over Gaza and withdraw? Will it agree to a role for the Palestinian Authority at a later stage? and what sort of interim government, what the mandate of the International Stabilization Force, how it will be composed, who's going to be paying for it. There are so many complexities related to the plan, but if there is a political will and a determined conviction on the part of all concerned, but primarily, I think, much rests on the policies of the Israeli government and its willingness to implement the various stages of the plan. Of course, there is a responsibility on Hamas as well, but I think we have to take the overall picture and deal with the needs of the 2 million Palestinians who have lost their livelihoods, who have lost their families, who have lost their being homeless, and how we address all of these dimensions.
It didn't really come out very clear in the discussion as to how committed Israel is to this ceasefire. We keep seeing in the press reports about Hamas breaking the ceasefire because they can't find the bodies of the hostages. But there's very little about the fact that Israel isn't actually abiding by it either, because they are not allowing the amount of aid they promised to go in. They're still stopping a lot of it. And there are obviously reports coming out of Palestinians dying again, and one wonders how genuine some of the reasons for those airstrikes are.
Well, as you mentioned, definitely Israel has continued to undertake military airstrikes against what they consider as threats to their military on the ground. And this is contravenes the stipulations of the agreement. But at the same time, both parties and the international community are insistent that despite these military activity, that the ceasefire is in place. Nobody wants to see it unravel, and thereby we return to full-fledged military confrontation and the subsequent effect on the Palestinian people in terms of loss of life. I think I posed the question, which is more broad in how does Israel view, what does it have in terms of articulating its vision for a resolution of the conflict. It hasn't provided the international community with any particular vision of. It speaks about its security. You have to take into account that its existence is not in question. There is no Arab state that questions the existence. Everyone has recognized the existence of Israel. It is only Israel that still avoids the recognition of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. So we are not speaking, as maybe some demonstrated in this panel, that both sides have to agree and to recognize each other. Palestinian Authority has recognized the State of Israel. Most Palestinians, moderates, irrespective of the minority of the radicalized and radical segments of the Palestinian population, agree to the two-state solution and thereby accept the existence of Israel.
But Israel doesn't agree to the two-state solution.
Exactly. That is, I think, the primary hindrance, and that is why I asked, what is the vision of Israel to end this conflict? And how do we define this constant narrative that Israel's security is a threat? Israel is a very powerful state of the region. It has demonstrated its military prowess, its ability to extend its military reach outside its borders. It is a state with institutions, with a thriving economy. And again, it is incorrect to try to equate Israel to the Palestinians. The Palestinians are under authority. They don't have a state of their own. The Palestinian Authority has been discredited, has been by the Israeli government and its policies. It has been delegitimized, and again, the burden of reform on it without the international community defining the parameters of that reform and how, when, and at what time, and under what conditions will there be an acceptance that it has reformed sufficiently, and by whose values and evaluation will we have reached that position, as is I think, a main concern with the plan itself, when it referred to the aspirations of Palestinian people, it incorporated so much conditionality, undefined and without parameters, that it might lead eventually, and I don't know after 80 years what is going to happen to create those conditions and who is going to evaluate that those conditions have been met.
Two things again arise. First, is it realistic to think the problem can be solved without the input of the Palestinians themselves? It's their state that we're talking about. And you mentioned Israel's borders. Israel actually doesn't have borders because it never defined them. And that's a problem. Should that not have been part of the solution
Well,
too?
if Israel hasn't defined its borders, but I think internationally there are recognized borders that have been recognized. For example, Israel's borders with Egypt by virtue of the peace agreement between Egypt and Israel. Its southern border is very well defined and cannot be in any way circumvented.
Yeah, but the West Bank, Jordan, all that, it's very unclear.
It is a point. I take the point, but I think there is a general recognition that the current lines that define what constitutes Israel and what constitutes the occupied territories is well documented by the UN, by the international community, and there are elements maybe in Israel that want to create the vagueness and the lack of definition for purposes of their own. But I think it is not helpful that we dwell on this, but rather dwell on more the fundamental issues of a comprehensive peace. And here, I think what leads to, let us say, cautious optimism is that the U.S. administration and President Trump, this is the first U.S. administration that has gone as far as to actually utilize its leverage to extract a policy from the Israeli government that probably was not existent and was not part of the plan. The acceptance of Israel to the ceasefire maybe goes against the policy objectives that the Israeli government was seeking to achieve in its military action, which is displacement, which is annexation, which is changing the nature of Gaza. So to have been able to influence Israeli policy and to utilize substantial U.S. leverage and political capital, I think is an important development that should be encouraged.
Former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt, Sameh Shoukry.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Another panellist was Amre Moussa, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt and former Secretary-General of the League of Arab States.
The main point is that we have an opportunity now, after the ceasefire initiative by President Trump, led by President Trump, that everybody supports the ceasefire, that it has to come to an end, the bloody period in Gaza, and in fact in the West Bank too. They must come to an end in order for us to be able to move on towards peace. That's number one. Number two, the peace itself has an opportunity now. The 20 points proposed by President Trump, many of them are, in fact, necessary to address, to negotiate, perhaps to reformulate. But there is an opportunity to move on towards a final solution. We don't have to work for years and leave the situation as it is. The point now, after all what happened in Gaza and what is happening in the West Bank now, and the occupied territories, there is an opportunity for us to say enough is enough. Now let us see how can we establish peace between Palestinians and the Israelis. And this could be done through the peace plans and peace ideas that are being entertained by the parties. I exclude, of course, the current government in Israel because They never spoke about peace or showed respect for the prospects of peace. But there are Israelis, I suppose, that would understand that for peace to be established, they have to consider what the Palestinians need. And the important thing that the Palestinians insist on and need to have is a Palestinian state, a Palestinian viable state. So, and that was the essence of the discussion. A Palestinian state, a viable one, alongside the Israeli state, in a area of people learning to put an end to this confrontation, the Israeli Arab, the Israeli Palestinian confrontation. It will, once all of us see that there is an opportunity to move on towards conciliation, peace, Palestinian state, security for all, etc., we will change the area's sense of despair.
There are two things that arise from what you've said. One is the West Bank. Nobody has spoken at all during the panel discussion about what is happening right now in the West Bank.
They are
and
mistaken.
The
that is why I see.
settlers,
Yes, of course.
And how they're dividing up the land that historically was Palestine so that there cannot be a Palestinian state.
Yeah, that is what they are trying to do. But there will be a Palestinian state because we will build it again. Because now see Gaza, it is totally destroyed, demolished. There is, in so many cities, there is not a single building that remains intact or even half intact, regardless of that. Despite all that, you see the Palestinians in Gaza are very smiling, hoping for the future, and ready to build up again their cities and villages, etc. So it is that once we have the will, and I believe we have the will to rebuild, but we're not going to rebuild it for Israel to destroy it again. So it has to be rebuilt within a framework of a démarche towards peace.
Right, but who is going to decide who rules the Palestinians? Because they're being left out of all these discussions. And I'm sure that most countries would not accept foreigners coming in and saying, okay, we are going to run your country for you, even temporarily. There are leaders in Palestinian prisons, not Hamas people, who've been there for many, many years.
Of course, like Marwan Barghouti, for example.
That was who I had in mind.
You are absolutely right.
He's being prevented, because he's still in jail, from taking over, because I think we'd all agree that the current Palestinian Authority has been, completely ineffectual.
Yeah. You know, you are right. I believe that Barghouti, in prison or out of prison, should be involved in the rebuilding the Palestinian
he could actually draw the Palestinian
state
together.
Yeah.
Could he not?
Yes, indeed.
And is that why he's still in prison?
And President Trump has said in clear words that yes, he should be released. And perhaps he could. I read something about President Trump called on Israel to release him. Of course, the Israelis rejected this. I believe the moment will come to the Israelis to understand that they have to think, other than using force, to think of how to rebuild an area of peace, including the state of Israel and the state of Palestine. But I would tell Mr. Netanyahu and the rest of those in the current government do not appreciate peace. They do not want peace to prevail.
Yes, but they have a plan for Israel, the greater Israel, don't they? And that includes not just the West Bank and Gaza,
of course.
but quite a bit of the Sinai Peninsula, Jordan, and a lot of other areas.
I tell you, they will not succeed. They will not succeed. Because they cannot do that alone. They must have the support of the strong support, money and weapons and even political plans of big powers like the United States. I don't think the US would do that. Help Israel in getting in occupying more territories or annexing more territories, because this will mean that, okay, we are back to square one, and so many things like this 7th of October will happen again. So we are now at crossroads. Reading what President Trump was saying is that he wants to achieve peace. And peace cannot be interpreted or described as the surrender of the Palestinians. Peace cannot be established that way. I believe President Trump is rethinking, and I hope that he would lead the process of establishing peace, checking the Israelis that not everything they believe in will have to be done, or not everything they want will have to be done. No, it will not have to be done. One thing, if they think, or they declare that many of their leaders in the government now, they declared that we disagree with the Palestinian. Palestinian has no right to have a state, and it is our call. You see what's going on now in the Knesset itself. So they don't want a state. So should we accept that, all of us? The big powers, small powers, Europe, Arab world, accept that? I don't think we'll accept it. And I don't think President Trump would accept that.
Amre Moussa, former Secretary General of the League of Arab States and also former Foreign Minister of Egypt.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
Other members of the morning panel at that conference included Haris Georgiadis, former finance minister here in Cyprus, a member of our parliament who stands as the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. This is what he had to say.
Let me say that I believe that peace is possible. And peace in the region is possible because you, Egypt and Israel, have shown us that it is possible almost half a century ago. Egypt and Israel fought, but then they were brave enough to take decisions that led to peace between Israel and the largest, most significant Arab country, Egypt, a country which we consider as a friend, a partner, and a pillar of stability, as much as we consider our relation with Israel to be equally strategically significant. So it is possible. It has shown to be possible. But that peace became possible when we had brave leaders. Some of them paid with their life for the decisions that they took to compromise and to reach to peace. I also agree with what the minister has said, that now there is a glimmer of hope. And there is a glimmer of hope because Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, which was moving the scenes, moving the pawns behind the scenes, have taken a blow. Because I definitely agree that there are extremist voices in Israeli politics and even in Israeli government which are not helping. But how can we even discuss the prospects for peace when it is Hamas and Hezbollah and the mullahs of Iran who are calling the shots in the region? So today there is indeed a glimmer of hope. Dear John, dear friends, I would also say that this is a region, the East Med and the Middle East is a region which matters. It is not a geopolitically insignificant region. It is a region of where we have major centers of population, of maritime and energy routes, but mainly it is a region where we can see wars and conflicts and terror, or we can see We can see prospects for collaboration and cooperation in energy, investment across the fields. Whether this region takes the positive, optimistic route or remains engulfed in wars and terror depends on how we act. Dimitris Avramopoulos quite rightly said that today it is the epicenter of global attention, and it is a region which calls for this attention. Well, if it is so important, a region which is leading to this mobilization, how did we allow Hamas to take hold and using Western money, European money that we were sending as aid to construct this terror network, which basically not only led to bloodshed and terror and humanitarian tragedy, but disrupt the stability of the region. Did we not see, or did we pretend not to see? How did we allow Lebanon, another important regional actor, another friend of Cyprus, to be for years under the rule of Hezbollah and the Assad regime and the Iranian influence? The point I am making is that if we are to be successful in the region, we basically need to wake up. I am referring to the West, I'm referring to Europe, I'm referring to America. We cannot allow such developments to happen, and our reaction being one of disengagement and distance. How can we allow one country after the other in this region to come under the category of failed states without our active involvement in favor of the moderate forces in the region? So yes, this is a crucial region, and we must do whatever we can to ensure that it takes the positive path, which I do believe, and history has shown that it is possible.
The panel discussion overran, but there was time for just one question.
Assuming that this ceasefire holds, let's hope so, does Trump's 20-point plan specify who will pay for the reconstruction of Gaza? There have been many calls for Russia to pay for reparations due to its destruction in Ukraine. I haven't yet, I think, heard a single call for Israel to foot the bill for the destruction of Gaza. Who does the panel think should pay? Thank you.
I don't know, Ambassador, if you want to give a quick comment on that. I mean, the European Union often has to pay for things.
Who's going to pay the bill?
Who is going to pay for the reconstruction of Gaza is the question.
Do you really want me to answer this question?
Yes, of course.
You don't have to.
Why not?
Israel will not pay for Gaza. I think it's clear to everybody that it makes sense. Who will pay for Gaza? The international community that think that this is what they need to do to reconstruct and rehabilitate Gaza in the West, in the Arab world, and elsewhere. I think they are the one that will be paying this eventually.
One last comment from each of you.
Yep. Yes, I believe Israel has to pay. Israel is responsible for the destruction, the major destruction that has taken place in Gaza. So others should not pay for that. Israel is responsible for that and should be called upon to pay and to redress that imbalance.
But let's pay a good bill, all of us, in order to establish peace in the region. Otherwise, it will be an open bill for the future.
Fundamentally, from a humanistic perspective, the reconstruction has to be taken and implemented. And the problem is that everyone is going to try to deflect from that responsibility on the premise that it is the responsibility of someone else, being very practical about it. And then again, it's a matter of if there is an obligation to reconstruct Gaza, what is the incumbent obligation about the creation of a Palestinian state? And you asked about the position of Europe and the UK. I have to say that the UK had, when it was in the European Union, was usually the damper to a common European position when it came to the conflict, was always in line with the US policies, which have, again has not endorsed this administration, the two-state solution. So we are in a bit of a vicious cycle, but again, reconstruction is related to the overall comprehensive peace that we all seek, and that comprehensive peace has to take into account the creation of a Palestinian state.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.